What's good, everybody? I'm Jay Webb, of course, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of Over Quota. Please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review if you haven't already. Now, my goal, as always, is to give listeners a variety of perspectives and insights from sales leaders who have a proven track record of exceeding expectations for themselves, but also their teams. Realizing, of course, that not one person has all of the answers. And like always, until someone comes along and wants to sponsor this podcast, the J. David Group, which is my company, will sponsor this podcast. My company helps high-growth software companies recruit top software salespeople and sales leaders. Go to thejddavidgroup.com/hiring to learn more about that, or go to thejddavidgroup/looking if you're looking for your next big challenge. Now, my guest today is Brooke Freedman. She's the Senior Director of Sales at Litmus, which provides an email marketing or email workflow and collaboration platform for marketers. Brooke, welcome to Over Quota.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So let's start there. Tell us a bit about Litmus and the value proposition that you offer your customers.
Sure. So as you mentioned, we're an email marketing collaboration and optimization platform. We work with pretty big businesses, a lot of brands, both B2C and B2B, to help them optimize their email workflow and performance, get better outcomes, and do it more efficiently. And we have been in business for quite a while, actually. This company goes way back, but our direct sales team is really only a few years old. Historically, Litmus did all of its business touchlessly online without a sales team. And the sales team that we have now has really only been around for a few years and has done really, really well since we got it in place.
I'm curious about that. What was the impetus? So what was the compelling event, if you know, in terms of how they went from sort of, I guess, self-managed sales, so to speak, to a sales team where it's more hands-on and white glove?
Mm-hmm. So the background at Litmus is that we had a set of online products, relatively low price, that anyone could go online, throw it on their credit card, and buy and use. And the nice thing about Litmus is anyone who runs email marketing can use and get value out of Litmus. A few years ago, we wanted to develop a product that was enterprise grade, had additional functionality and capability, and would bring value into the enterprise market. And this was before I got there, but the team knew that we'd need to start to develop a sales team for that, to initially sell the enterprise software into the base that we had, and then go out and find new folks that didn't even know about us yet. So it really was sort of the second act for Litmus to develop this enterprise platform and build the sales team to go with it.
Talk to me about that then. Tell me a little bit about your role and the sales team that you lead.
Sure. So I direct our sales team. We are made up of mid-market and enterprise. So those are broken up into two parts. Our mid-market team sells to businesses up to 5,000 employees, and then enterprise is 5,000 and above. We have AEs, but we also have a pretty big, robust BDR team that works alongside all of the reps, and we sell into our existing customer base when we have good fits that can benefit from everything that we have in the full platform. We'll work with them to upgrade them into the right platform. And then we also go outbound and we find new folks that don't know about us yet. Our BDR team does a lot of that work. And then in addition to that, we have a really good inbound machine that our marketing team runs, and we bring a lot of inbound leads in because of the thought leadership at Litmus. We're very lucky to have a lot of new folks that come into us just looking for help from our content.
What are the different or the differences in terms of skill set that you're looking for the people that are calling on the companies that are up to 5,000 employees, and then the people that are over 5,000 employees? Or are there differences? Tell me a little bit about how you think about that and how you evaluate talent as they're coming in.
Well, our mid-market sales team is selling to pretty big businesses. When you get up into that 5,000 employee level, really like 3,000 to 5,000, which is the sweet spot in mid-market, you're working a pretty enterprise sale there. Mm-hmm. You'll usually have multiple stakeholders. You'll have procurement. You'll have legal. procurement and legal. In that way, you really do need someone who is very comfortable upmarket. It's a little different than some companies that are selling into kind of lower mid-market, where it might be a very small team, one decision maker, quick sales cycle. Our sales cycles are still relatively quick at Litmus, but the qualities that we're looking for are much more enterprise on our mid-market team than at a lot of other companies.
And when you say qualities are much more enterprise, like what are some of the behaviors or I guess traits would be a better question in terms of what you would be looking for?
I think when you're selling into a pretty large company, you need to understand how to map out all the different groups that you might be selling into. Preparation is really important, and a strong sense of business acumen is important too, just kind of knowledge of how businesses work. I think all of these are great qualities though too, no matter what you're selling. And so I actually think that some of the main qualities and behaviors that you look for in salespeople can translate pretty well no matter what, as long as the candidate that you're talking to kind of understands the differences between different businesses and how they're set up.
How do you tease that out in terms of, let's say, business acumen? Business acumen is probably harder to tease out probably than preparation, because that can be in pretty much real time, depending on what kind of preparation you expect the candidate to do. But I'm curious about business acumen. How can you assess that and tease that out as you're talking to candidates and they're going through the process?
I try to ask them questions about specific deals that they've worked on, and to tell me a little bit about the business, how they make money, how the product that they sold in their previous job or in other jobs before that played a role in helping them to generate more revenue. Mm-hmm. And if they can kind of talk me through that through a couple of different instances, I can get a pretty good handle on how well they understand how businesses work and how they make decisions based on revenue and impact.
Yeah, that makes sense. And if you're how many people do you have on your team now? Like how large is your team?
Our mid-market sales team has 16 AEs on it. The enterprise sales team at Litmus has 8 right now. And then our BDR team is, I believe, at about 13.
Okay. If you have a team as you do, and you're bringing people in that, that you're evaluating them on what you just said in terms of bigger business acumen and preparation and all that, if they have enough to sort of pass the smell test initially, to bring the litmus test, I guess, to get them in and to onboard them, but there are gaps in their experience, or there are gaps in a particular skill. How do you coach the right behaviors that will get them up to speed quickly, and so that they can be the performer that you're hoping for them to be, that you need them to be?
Yeah, that's a good question. And ideally in the interview process, you can pick up on which of the skills you think that they're going to be behind on, and you don't want too many of them. You need enough of it to line up. But if it is, 1 or 2 things that you think that they're going to need some extra work on, the first step is to make sure that you are pretty confident that they are coachable. And when I think about coachability, it's not just that, they're open to feedback and they'll work on something with you, but then that they can put it into practice and show that they can improve. And you can kind of test for that real time as you're going through the interview process. And if out of the gate what that person's going to need some extra work on, then you can prioritize that for some extra sessions in their first couple of months as they onboard. And it's done mostly through role play and call reviews. I find that there's no better way to help someone get better at a specific skill than daily, weekly, monthly practice. And it has to be consistent. It has to go on for an extended period of time. It's not done in a day. It's not done in a week. You really commit to it. And you measure it as you go. And if you can start to see improvements in one skill area that you knew that person was going to need to work on, and you can get them to kind of like your baseline, in the first few months that they're on your team, then you can start to invest in, doubling down on additional skills from there that maybe they had coming in, but now they can get even better. But you focus on, the ones that they were behind on first.
As you're practicing daily, how do you measure that? How can you measure and level them up, if you will, and say, okay, to your point, right now they've gotten to a certain level of skill the way that I would want them to be, and now let's focus on some of the other things that were stronger, and let's get them even stronger on that. How are you measuring them along the way? Are you using tools, or is it anecdotal?
So some of it is anecdotal, and you need good managers and coaches that can kind of see and get a sense for how well this person is improving. But where you really see it come out is in their funnel metrics. If this person wasn't doing very well at generating pipeline and connecting with prospects, but they're really strong in other areas, then that might be what you work on with them in the first couple of months, is just really refining how they connect when they first get in touch with someone. And after the first month, and then again in the second month, you're going to look to see how that connect rate improved. And if you see it, it's working, and you can kind of start to move on to something else. But until you see that improve, that you're not there yet.
And you once said that you have a process for everything. And I'm wondering, talk to me about the process you have for onboarding new hires, and what happens when you don't have a process. What's the detriment there? What's the downfall when you don't have a process?
Yeah, I think in terms of process, both for a person in their sales, so your sales process, and then your onboarding process, the negative outcome that can come from being all over the place is that you never really know what to fix. Mm-hmm. You can't figure out what's going wrong if you don't know the steps that you took to get there. So just like in selling, you have your sales process to make sure that you follow the same steps every time to get somewhat consistent results. And if something breaks down, you kind of know what to go back and take a look at. Same thing with onboarding. And so what we do at Litmus is we bring a new hire on board. They spend their first week with us with our onboarding enablement team. And the two of them actually bring all of our new hires in the first week through classroom style rundown of the product, our customers, our value proposition, and all of the details around like the big picture. Mm-hmm. And after the first week, the new hire will hit the sales floor. We team them up with someone else on the team that can show them the ropes from the floor, but they start their manager onboarding week then. And as managers, we spend the first month working just on the discovery, and we do 4 sessions with every new hire in a room together. The first session is the framework. We go through the framework. The second session is a call review. We listen to someone else's call that's been on the team for a while. We talk about it. The third session is role play, and the fourth session, we certify them, and we actually play back one of their calls. So by the end of the first month, every single person who has started on the team is fully certified for the discovery. And in the second month, we move on to the demo, and we do sprinkle in some other pieces around mutual action plan, negotiation in those 2 months. And then by the third month, they really are fully independent, and they should be up and running and able to manage their entire sales process on their own independently.
When you say certify, is it what I want to say it's like a certificate or something? What does it look like when someone is certified, if you will?
I haven't really, nailed down with the managers yet exactly what kind of a fancy certificate we would give. We probably should do that.
Yeah.
But at this point, when we get through that last session, the manager or myself will just give the feedback on that actual call that the rep played back for us. We let them know that, we're confident in their ability to run a discovery themselves without a senior rep or a manager on the phone, and they move on from there. But we probably should do something nice like a certificate and a full write-up, but we haven't gotten there yet.
Cool. Okay. You mentioned managers. That's one thing I want to start talking about more on this podcast, because I feel like managers, I leave them out. I don't know why, but I just do, which I shouldn't be. And I was talking to somebody else about this the other day, about managing managers and coaching managers and sort of making that transition from a sales rep and individual contributor to managers. how what would your advice be, I guess, for people who want to make that transition from individual contributor to manager? And then what are some of the things that are different that they should know about and be prepared about, and some of the hurdles, I guess, that they could expect that that you can help them sort of get over when they do start becoming managing a team?
Yeah, and I think so many sales reps think that they should move into management, because it's the next step. And I've seen so many people think that it's the right move for them and then get into the role and be shocked at how different it is from what they thought it would be and from the job that they loved. And I think a lot of really good sales reps can be good sales managers, but really your day-to-day is so different. What you're spending your time on is so far and away different from what you were doing as an individual contributor that I find it's really helpful to spend some time thinking about, the responsibilities and the day-to-day of the job before you get into it, and, shadow some managers for a couple of weeks, take on a team lead role if there is one available, because you kind of get a taste for what the reality of management is like. And I think a couple of the biggest differences that I've found is that, as an individual contributor, you have all this autonomy. It's a kind of glamorous job a lot of the time if you're doing really well. You're at the top of the charts, and you run your own business. And I think when you move into management, you find out pretty quickly that you're managing, in a lot of cases, a pretty big team of a lot of different kinds of people at different levels that need a lot of help. And you give up your autonomy for that. And you spend a lot of your day in a conference room doing one-on-ones and call prep and call recap, and you're not running the sale and you're giving up control. And when you give up the control, even though you're in charge, and it sounds like contradictory, you're in charge, but you've given up control. And what you're doing now is you're really developing people. And you have to have kind of like a teaching mentality about you, where you can find the patience to really let people blossom on your team, and they go through some tough patches along the way, and you'll take the bumps with that. Like if everyone on your team isn't hitting, that's a challenge. But you have to get more out of that at a personal level, and you really can't know it until you're in it, if that's for you. But I think the best, to give you a short answer to your question, I think the best way to figure it out is to be a team lead for a little while and take on some management responsibility and decide, where do I thrive as an individual contributor or as a leader?
Do you see the difference between, and if you don't, then just say so, I guess, but the difference between managing and leading? And if so, like what are they, I guess, philosophically? How are they different?
I totally see a difference. I think, leadership is setting a course. It is positive reinforcement. It's listening. It is, in a lot of cases, giving guidance, sometimes even outside of the job itself and the numbers. And then on the flip side, management is getting the job done. And in a lot of cases, it is managing to a number. It is the forecast. It is hiring. And the two are different, and you have to be able to do both. I find that, when you're managing, if you lose sight of the leadership piece, you can lose the energy on the team too. And you can't lose energy on a sales team. So you have to be able to kind of like bounce back and forth between. And as you build out a management team, I found it's also really helpful to find people that kind of complement each other too. If you have two managers on your team and you're a director, and you can get one manager who's really, really strong at like the management stuff, the guts of like spreadsheets and numbers and pipeline management, all that. And you have another person who just has so much energy and people follow them and would do anything for them, and you can kind of get them to bounce off of each other, then it can be really good for the team.
Which is easier to coach towards, right? We were talking about coaching certain behaviors for people that may have a deficiency one way or another. If you have a manager that has a deficiency in leading, let's just say, setting a course and positive reinforcement and all that type of stuff versus the management piece, and vice versa, which would you, if you had one to choose that had one strength or the other, which one would you choose?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, the bigger your team gets, your managers need to be managers. And I say that because the bigger the team gets and the further away you get as a director or a VP or, wherever you're at from the day to day, and you're not in the weeds of the deals and you're not in the deal reviews, you have to trust that that stuff is happening. And it will be too late when you find it out. If you have a couple of managers that don't manage very well, it'll bubble up to you at a point where the month is toast or the quarter's toast. So you really need to be able to count on those people to do that piece. And if you need to pick up some of the slack on the leadership for the whole segment or organization, you can fill in those gaps while you coach that manager on those skills too. Because, sometimes you'll find that you have someone that just isn't, a 10 at both, and you got to kind of get them there.
Right. Yep. That makes sense. And speaking of getting them there, how do you manage folks that are underperforming, right? I mean, obviously what we're talking about now has been more tacked towards people that have the skill set and maybe are doing well and that type of thing. When you have someone who's struggling, either as an individual contributor or a manager, how do you manage them? And is it possible to turn someone who has really been struggling, let's just put them in the category of a C player, to bring them into an A player? And if so, how so?
It depends. I think that if you have a C player and you figure it out after you hire them, hopefully you're figuring it out pretty quickly. And that kind of goes back to the part of our discussion where we're talking about onboarding. And if you have that process and consistency around onboarding and you kind of know your track record, you're going to see it pretty quickly that you have made a hire that maybe isn't what you thought they were. And you can pretty quickly get in the weeds with them and try to figure out if you can move them forward or not. And then if you need to make a hard decision, you're making it sooner than later. Whereas if you're getting someone into a role maybe off your BDR team, which we do a lot at Litmus, we promote from within, and we're developing reps into closing roles. And a lot of times they do need a lot more development work. And if they're coachable and they're willing to put in the work and do the practice and can kind of own it, then I do believe that there are people that are newer into sales or at a C level, you can get them to an A. But it does take that commitment, the coachability, and the practice and the effort. And if you don't see all of those things, you kind of have to call it sooner than later. If you brought someone in from the outside that has a track record in sales and they've been selling for a few years, and you've realized that you've actually hired a C, you kind of got to give them a window to improve and be really upfront. I think setting great expectations with a rep when they come in about what success looks like and what you're looking for out of the team is really helpful. And we kind of owe it to salespeople to give that to them so they never have to wonder where they stand. And then they're either going to step up or they're not. And I've actually seen some reps both at Litmus and then, in the past, who have owned it to the point where they've even put together, their own plan. Like before they ever even go on a coaching plan, they'll put together their own plan. It's a lot like a QBR. They present it back and then they manage themselves before we need to manage them to a plan. And those are the kinds of people that can turn it around and really get, to a B plus A level.
Yeah, it sounds like that mentality. I mean, that's like A level mentality. Maybe they just hadn't been performing at A level, right? And it sounds to me like that approach would be one that would be more sustainable and more successful. In other words, it's not just going to be a blip like, oh, great, they just made the number this month, or they just made the number this quarter, but something that might sustain over a longer period of time because they took ownership of it and made it work for them, as opposed to somebody that's, just trying to stop the bleeding, so to speak, so that, Brooke doesn't ride me anymore, or even worse, let me go, if you will, right?
Yeah, and I think like you start to see the real personality traits in there, right? Like someone who has the grit and is willing to dig in and do the hard work. And I kind of keep going back to owning it, because as a manager, I can't want it more than you want it. And if you have that quality about you as a rep where you're going to do whatever it takes to improve and you're going to put in the extra practice, you're going to get better. And it's the folks that don't, and they make an excuse or they think that there's nothing that they can do about it, that won't that they won't improve. And you have to kind of call it when you see it as a leader.
What about some of the, I was going to say inequities, but that's not a good word. But like when you have a situation where the executive team, the board, whomever, is expecting a certain number, right? And you have a forecast of, or a goal, if you will, that you need to hit as a company, but they're more aggressive than what you believe really that your team's going to be able to do, just given either last year's performance or what the pipeline looks like. Like, how do you manage up and down, I guess, if you will, through all that to be a leader, right? To get your team to believe in the number that the company is set for them, or to manage the executive team and say, hey, you know, this is a little bit of a stretch. We need to modify that. Like, talk to me about what happens there.
Yeah. Well, I'll kind of start with how to manage down to the team with a big number. You have to help them find a plan to get there. And if the team doesn't believe that they have a good plan, then they aren't going to believe in their ability to hit the number. And it is partly on them. You know, I talked a lot a minute ago about owning it and putting in the work and getting better. There's that. But then as managers, we have to make sure that we're setting the team up for success with the roadmap to accomplish it. And I always go back to metrics, because if you understand how many people you need to reach out to, whether it's an inbound lead or outbound or wherever it's coming from, to create X number of ops, to create X number of qualified ops, to create X number of closed deals, you can work your way to the goal that way. And when you lay out the numbers for the team and you show them their path for how they're going to get there, they start to trust in your ability to lead them in that direction. And then they go and they do the work to make it happen. I think those same numbers apply to managing up. You know, when I meet with my bosses, CEO, CFO, the VPs, and then they're in turn going to go talk to the board, I try to give a really early heads up on anything that's not shaking out the way that we thought that it would. I don't want it to be a surprise, because there's one thing that boards don't like, and that's to be surprised. And as a manager or a director or VP, you want to show that like you have control of your business, you understand it, and you can see it coming. You just don't want to not see it coming. So if you're always kind of managing your funnel metrics, and you know, us, for example, we know that if we create 100 opportunities this month in a segment, that we're going to push 50% forward. And of those, we're going to close 28%. We know our deal size, we know our sales cycle. So I can tell you today exactly what's going to happen, or I can tell you by the end of April, exactly what's going to happen in June. And then with the forecast, you kind of have your individual contributors all keeping the forecast updated every day. And we have really rigorous deal criteria. So there isn't a lot of room for gut feeling. Like it either is in a stage or it isn't, and managers manage that weekly as well. So the forecast is like a living, breathing thing. And on any given day, you should be able to look at the forecast in the CRM, match it up to the numbers that you had in your sales funnel 2 months ago, and they should look about the same. And knock on wood, they do, you know, within 5 to 10% at the most. There isn't a drastic swing in our sales cycle. There isn't a drastic swing in our close rate. So we know the work we need to go back to do to create more opportunities if we're behind goal. So to kind of bring it back to your question, if I have to manage up and give information to my bosses or to the board about where we're at in regard to the sales plan, I'll let them know where we are, how we got there, where we missed a couple of months ago, and what our plan is to fill the gap. And I found that works pretty well, just to keep everyone really close to the business and with a lot of transparency and as early as possible.
I have 2 questions to follow up on that. The first one is, you mentioned like top of the funnel. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes, I feel like it's happening less often lately, thank goodness. But sometimes when I talk to candidates, they'll say, oh, you know, my territory wasn't as strong as somebody else's, or it was week or whatever, right? There's an excuse that there wasn't enough opportunity to hit their number, if you will. How do you make it equitable, I guess, for your reps, and is it always equal? And if it's not, how do you set that vision for them and get them to believe in the path that you're setting for them?
I mean, I think that every company runs into points where there are inequities, and you have to update territories often enough and with enough data going into that territory planning to spread it around so that people have a fair shot. And you know, what we did earlier this year was we took a look at all of the closed deals, you know, per geo. We looked at our install base, we looked at the addressable market, and we looked at lead flow. And you know, we have a team on our data side that did some analysis around that to figure out how we could carve up the territories and piece them together like, you know, like Lego blocks, so that you can move it all around in a way that everyone's got a pretty fair shot. And from there, as a rep, this is where you kind of got to start to own it. You have levers, right? Like if you can drive your deal size up and get more bigger deals, then you're going to hit your number faster than your teammate who's maybe selling a lot of smaller deals with the same size patch. And if you can up your activity, you might be able to create more opportunities in that same patch as your peer who is kind of going about things the same way as when they had more coming into them. And, you know, we all want to grow. We want to work for companies that are growing, not going in the other direction. So if you're growing, you know, it's working. And that's one thing that I always, you know, try to talk to the team about, is that if you're on a team where there's this kind of growth, that we're adding more people into territories, you're on the right boat. Now we have to make sure that, you know, we're doing our best job to maximize our opportunity in every territory. And if you do that, you'll hit your goal.
How are you managing and motivating your team and keeping them focused during this time of everybody working from home and what's going on with the pandemic and prospects leaning on the, you know, I wouldn't even say an excuse, but the reality of that, you know, their budgets are cut because they just don't have the money that they had coming in. Like, how do you manage all that and keep your team focused?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, this is one of the harder challenges that I've seen since I've been in sales. You know, I sold through 2008 and 2009. I was in ad sales then. And it was very, very difficult. We saw that coming. You know, I think that was the big difference was, you know, this was a big surprise to a lot of people. And, you know, everyone was kind of like chugging along, things are good, and like the bottom comes out and the world stops. The bright side is I don't think it's going to stop for very long. You know, we're gonna get through this. We'll come out the other end, and the folks that continued working hard during this time are going to have pipeline when we come out of this. I think the other thing that I focused on a lot with the team is spending time on the right kinds of opportunities. Like, look at the right industries that are less impacted than others. We're kind of lucky in that we sell globally. We don't sell into verticals, so we don't kind of get trapped in a bubble of this whole industry is a mess right now. So we can kind of spread ourselves around, and we sell to lots of different size businesses. And so, you know, the reps right now are mostly focused on who has more ability to move right now and can benefit from what we offer. And because what we do actually helps drive revenue, you know, what we sell does do that. If you depend on email for your revenue, this is going to help you with that. So what we had to do in the past few weeks is get even better at our messaging, at asking the right questions, and helping our prospects see how this is still a critical piece, even as they shrink down their budgets. But I think this contraction is temporary. I don't know how temporary, but I genuinely think that by Q3, we'll kind of be getting back to normal again. You know, for us, it's all about keeping the deals that we already had in the pipeline moving, stay really engaged, be helpful, and have some empathy, you know, for the businesses that we're working with. We've all gone remote. My entire team is remote. You know, we are a remote company, but the sales team goes into the office every day. We're a team that works together. So, you know, 4 weeks ago or whenever that was, we all left the office and had to resettle at home. And we've done more calls together, more team meetings than we usually do. just to get the FaceTime together, but recognize a lot of our prospects are in a different boat and they were not set up to go remote on a dime, so we definitely went through that patch, I think, for 2 or 3 weeks where, everyone in sales was trying to connect with people that weren't able to connect because there was that level of disruption with the way people were working, but starting to see some sense of normalcy again, which is good. And I think people want to do business. We need to keep doing business to keep the economy going in the right direction. We should all be working together to continue these conversations about, what kinds of products are going to help continue to grow revenue in 2020.
And let's say the spigot is turned back on, so to speak, and let's say someone submits a resume to you, or even now they submit a resume to you. Never mind later they submit a resume to you. What should be immediately evident to you when you're looking at their resume that says to you, okay, this person's worthy of my time? Maybe, obviously, I'm sure the resumes come before to other people before they reach you. But let's say, for instance, somebody just even a cold outreach and they reach out to you. What are you looking for immediately to say that this person is worth at least a conversation?
First of all, I love a cold outreach, and every once in a while someone actually does connect with me directly and ask for a meeting. It's more rare than I would think. I get a lot of folks that kind of come in through the right channel. They submit their resume online, but it always stands out to me when a candidate tracks me down and reaches out directly with a story about why they think that they might be a good fit and they want to have a conversation. In terms of resumes, I'd be interested to see what other sales leaders say, but I don't really pay that much attention to a resume. I really want to hear from someone directly what their story is. And that might be tied to the fact that I've known so many salespeople and had them work with me and for me that have kind of interesting backgrounds that don't always translate on a resume. And, even when I do get a resume, I'll quickly glance at it, like, where were you last? How long have you been doing it? And then I kind of put it aside and I get on the phone and I always do, my step one of our interview process is always a 15-minute call. Before we ever get into the interview process, I just want to talk to you. I want to hear how you sound on the phone. I want to hear you tell me your quick story. Even if you talked to a recruiter before, I want to hear it directly. And I can pretty much pick up in that 15 minutes what kind of salesperson you are, why you're in this profession, and what motivates you. And then from there, we can get into a real interview process. But I think a piece of paper is not a good way to judge somebody.
And when they're going through the process, by the way, I agree in so many different ways. When they're going through the process, what are the indicators that you're looking for that would map to, based on what you've seen, right, from the best salespeople that you're managing, that would map to a successful hire? Like, what are you looking for? What are you listening to?
I have a very specific list, and I sort of uncover it all the way through the steps of the interview process. Like the first call, I'm picking up on a couple of things. The in-person interview, I'm looking for a couple more. And then the last step is actually like a role play. We role play a full call, and I kind of pick up the rest there. And the managers do jump in and they run parts of the interview as well, and we all compare notes. But always looking for preparation. We talked about it sort of in the beginning of this discussion, that if someone goes out of their way to prepare for this call with me, they really know what our business does, who we sell to. They've done their research and they've been thoughtful about how they're going to interview with us. It is a pretty good indicator that that's how they go about life. And I want to see that because it's so important in sales, maybe now more than ever, that you go out of your way to be thoughtful about how you're going to connect, how you can be helpful, like where do you fit in, and then start a discussion in a way that you're adding some kind of value to the discussion for your prospects. So preparation is one. The second that I'm looking for is curiosity. And the reason I think that is important is because it kind of ties back to the discovery and being able to ask good questions and really uncovering like the motivations and the impact for this person to work with you or not. And if this person doesn't ask questions along the way during the interview, and I don't just mean at the end when you're like, what questions do you have for me? But I want them to ask questions as we're having a discussion, like pause and ask me. And if I find that like I'm answering questions as we go through an interview and it's a two-way dialogue, it's probably the way that it is for them when they're on the phone with a prospect. So curiosity is really good. Track record, I'm just looking to see like, what have you done? And sometimes it's not even that they were in the exact same sales job, selling to the same persona in the same size company, right? Like, I actually don't think that that always matters that much. What I want to see is that, you know, this person has drive and that they care about performance and that, you know, they set the bar for themselves and that they care so much about doing well that they don't need someone to motivate them. And those people do really, really well, you know, on our team, but I think on all sales teams. So that's, as it said, preparation, curiosity, you know, performance, and then coachability. And we talked a lot about that on this call too, because they're never going to get better if they can't take feedback and put it into practice. And those are the big ones. And a lot of them were the qualities that we're looking for at HubSpot. You'll notice that, you know, there's a very specific list there. And I played around a lot with this list and I wondered if at different companies, how much does it vary? I don't think it does. I think it's like, these are like fundamentally great sales qualities to have, and you can do well in almost anything.
I love it. So many things that I could say about everything that you just mentioned. One question I have is, you mentioned after you mentioned curiosity, you mentioned, you know, you'll get into their motivation, right? Their motives, right? What motives are you hoping that they have, or what's the wrong motive, I guess, if you will? Like what kind of motives are the ones that say, or motivation that say, you know what, this person's not going to be a good fit here because whatever?
I guess like, I feel like people in interviews maybe think that they need to talk about their next goal after this, you know, without even being prompted. Sometimes they'll say, well, I really want to get into management. And when I'm interviewing someone for an AE role, like, well, like, do you want to be an AE or do you want to be a manager? Because I'm hiring for an AE. And like, yes, we want to develop you long-term for your career into management if that's what you want to do, but will you be happy in a role like this? So, you know, one thing that we're looking for is that people genuinely love sales. They love selling. They love being on the phone. They love being in a sales conversation. Because if you don't love sales and like the motion of actually selling, the job's too hard. Like you just can't, you cannot grind it out the way that we grind it out in sales if you don't love selling. So I want to hear that you love selling. And if it's something different than that, there's just too much of what it doesn't interest you in what makes a salesperson successful. And I also I know a lot of people that think that all salespeople should be money motivated. And I do think it's important that you're motivated by money. Like you don't not want that on the table. But if that is the sole reason, I've found that those are also the same people that can run into a little trouble when things get tough. You know, like you have to have something else going on there. Be money motivated, but also be motivated by getting better, or be motivated by helping people, or be motivated by problem solving and figuring out how businesses work. Like those people do well no matter what, because inevitably you're going to go through a tough patch. Whether it's a month or a quarter, you're going to hit it along the way. And there has to be something else there that satisfies you about this job than just dollars. And that might be totally against what a lot of other managers and leaders say, but I've just found that the best people are motivated by something in addition to the money.
Yeah, no, and I think that doesn't go against, you and I were talking offline about sort of the word cloud that I would form based on all these interviews, but that's definitely something that I've heard multiple times, which is that there has to be something beyond the money, because to your point, right, you don't want these little ups and downs, and you know, if somebody's really excited about coming to work every day because they're having a great month and they're making money, and then all of a sudden, for one reason or another, the bottom falls out and they're not making money. You want them to keep that drive and keep that focus and come in happy every day, and work towards something. So that's definitely a commonality and a theme for sure that I've heard. One other thing that I just want to follow up on with that, and then we'll just a couple of other questions and we'll end it. I promise there won't be be simple, easy questions because I know you're taking up a lot of your time. But
Oh, I could do it all day. We talk about this too. I'm like a
yeah.
geek for this stuff, so I would talk about this all day long if you let me.
I know. I feel like already there should be a part 2 to this, which there should be. Drive. How do you tease that out? Like when you're looking for somebody that's driven. I know what I would typically look for, but what are you looking for when you're looking for drive? What are the indicators?
I mean, if we're talking about in the interview process, I just asked them about a time that they had a goal and tell me, and especially a hard goal, like something that wasn't a layup. And how did you get there? And I am especially interested in how you handle adversity and, what good looks like to you. And you start to like suss out some of that as you have that conversation with someone that like, if they do X, that becomes their new bar. And then anything under that is just, they can do better. And that's innate. Like I cannot teach that to you. I cannot coach that into you. You're that person or you're not. And it tends to crop up in everything that person does. I think it's why you see so many like A types in sales is that like, these are people that are going to go for whatever they're going for and nothing's going to stop them. But I guess it just boils down to like, how do you goal set? How do you get there? And tell me a story of how you overcame the challenge to get to that goal. And it comes out in that conversation.
Yep, absolutely. That's what I love to do too. I always like to know what kinds of goals they've set outside of the office, and then also, what how do you hold yourself accountable beyond what your company or manager or boss is actually holding you accountable? Like, what are you trying to do? How do you, I understand that that's your metric. That's the number that they want you to hit, right? But what do you want to hit and why? Like what's behind that? How do you keep yourself going there? So, all right. Okay, so one other sort of intricate type question, and then we'll get into the last question, which is, if somebody were to go from, or wanted to go from a mid-market to an enterprise, or to the way you guys move from BDR to the mid-market or the AE, what advice, or how do you know when someone's ready that hasn't necessarily done that before, especially if they're coming from the outside, right? They're interviewing for an enterprise role. They've only seen mid-market. Do you even consider them? And if you do consider them, what are the things that you need to see that shows that they're ready to make that next step?
Well, the gentleman who hires on the enterprise team does have a set of criteria that he's looking for. And I know that on that list, there's a lot, just in regard to strategic planning of accounts, the ability to collaborate really well with others internally, because you start to get into deals where, you need sales engineers involved, you maybe need to get product involved, you maybe need to get marketing involved because they are bigger, more complex deals. So how do you kind of like deal with your internal stakeholders as much as external? A lot around like owning the territory and top accounts, and having a real strategy around that. I don't think any of these are bad for mid-market though either. It's like the more you think about it, the qualities that make a really good enterprise salesperson are also qualities that can make someone in mid-market dangerous. Like you always want to be working towards getting better in those areas where you don't necessarily need it to get the deal done, but you're going to do better as a result. And so to kind of bring it back to like, what do we look for in people that are being promoted? Like first you have to hit, certain levels in your install base of how many deals you've sold to be eligible. But beyond that, it's like, how do you demonstrate these behaviors without it being a requirement? If it's not your job, what do you do every day to go above and beyond to get better at the skills that are maybe a little bit higher than what you need today? And that's what separates people, and I think that the cream rises to the top in that way. And you'll see people that progress a lot through their careers are always doing the extra work. They're like, nights and weekends is their thing, and they don't need to necessarily get paid for it. They know that it's going to pay off in the long run. It just takes that extra effort and time.
Yeah, and that maps to what we were saying a couple of minutes ago about drive, right? To be able to, even if it's not necessarily in their description, to be quarterbacking the deals and to collaborate and pull people in. The fact that they're driven enough to do that because they want to make sure that they're going to close that deal, and maybe that'll shorten the sales cycle even that much more in the mid-market.
Totally.
That's something that works. Okay.
Yeah.
Last question is, are you hiring? For which positions are you hiring, and how can folks get in touch with you?
Yes, we are. I'm always looking for great AE talent. So we will interview a great AE any day. So as I mentioned, I love when people reach out directly to me. And you can at bfreedman@litmus.com. It's BFREEDMAN @Litmus. Or you can find me on LinkedIn. And then we also have an immediate need for a few more business development reps on our team. So some openings there as well. And it's worth noting that 6 of our AEs came from our BDR team. So we do a ton of work every quarter to develop our BDR team. I actually personally do some of that training for our advanced senior BDRs, go through a whole series of sales coaching sessions with me directly. And that's, the investment that we make to make sure that people are on a great track in their careers to become AEs. So if you come in as a business development rep, there's a pretty good chance that you can earn your way into a spot pretty quickly on our AE team.
I'll put you on the spot if you don't mind and say how quickly is pretty quickly.
It could be within a year. I would say more realistically, it's 16, 18 months.
Okay.
And then even, one of our reps now, who was promoted off the BDR team, is now getting his first promotion in role as an AE, and he's only been in the job for 6 months. So lots of opportunities to make more money, to progress inside the roles, and then to go from role to role as well.
That's Brooke Freedman, Brooke with an E, by the way, an E at the end, Brooke, if you're looking to look her up on LinkedIn. Brooke Freedman, Senior Director of Sales of Litmus, thank you for going over Quota today.
Yeah, it was great to be here, and I'm happy to do it anytime. We should do part 2.
Absolutely. We will do part 2.
Okay. Thanks,
everybody. Goodbye.